Hey there, friends. Welcome to this episode of SelfKind. I am your host, Erica Webb, and I want to talk today about this idea of simplifying as sensitive people and how that can support us when we are feeling overwhelmed, when we are feeling overstimulated, and when we just straight up overcomplicate things. So welcome to this episode. If you are new around here, as I said, I'm Erica Webb. I am your host and I am a registered counsellor, somatic exercise coach, yoga teacher and highly sensitive person, and very much here to support my fellow highly sensitive people to navigate what it is to be sensitive in a world that often feels like it doesn't meet us there. So this is going to be a fairly short episode because I was thinking about this topic around simplicity. And so we will keep it simple by keeping it short. But the reason that this came up was I was thinking about this podcast. And recently I removed the intro and the outro, which had music and me talking over it. I removed those from my new recordings. And I did that because I saw somebody suggest it in a group somewhere. And I was like, wow, that never occurred to me that I could just not do that. Because when it comes to editing the podcast, it doesn't take a long time, but there are some elements of, put this track in, take that track out, change the volume, make sure it all matches, etc. And I am on a bit of a kick of like, how can I simplify things? Because I have a habit for sure of making things more complicated sometimes than they need to be. I don't know if that's a high sensitivity trait or just a me trait, but I definitely have a way of sometimes missing the really obvious and overcomplicating things when they could be really simple. And that works to my favor sometimes because I definitely come up with creative solutions to things and different ideas than I would if I saw the simple to start with. But it did get me thinking, how often am I asking the question of like, does it need to be this complicated? And so when I decided, okay, I'm going to have a little try of just removing the intro and the outro from the podcast, it saves me a little bit of time and it feels really good to just be like, well, that's simple, right? That's a simple little thing that I can do to change things. And so I wanted to ask you that question too. Where is there an opportunity to make things simpler? And that might be in your environment, it might be in your schedule, it might be in the way that you do a particular task. I want to give you a few examples because I think that's always really helpful. But I want to preface all of this by saying this is definitely something that I am playing with in real time. Simple doesn't tend to be my default, as I said, and I'm noticing that because I have been and still am kind of in this period of grief and loss and confusion and, post-traumatic kind of growth, I guess, I'm noticing that my capacity for things to not be going well is much lower than it would be if I wasn't in that stage, right? And so I'm just noticing that my sensitivity feels very heightened. And so as a result of that, little things seem to get on my nerves more than they would have in the past and probably than they will in the future. So I'm noticing that simple little things that I can do to create more simplicity and more visual simplicity for myself is really helpful. So here's a couple of things that I'm doing that might just spark some ideas for you. So one of them is in the morning, I tend to cook breakfast for my kids and myself. And the dishes, if they don't get done straight away in the morning, they become very overwhelming to me throughout the day. It kind of is one of those things I walk through the kitchen because I work from home and I'll walk through the kitchen. I'll be like, oh, those dishes, it just feels really overwhelming. Now, in the past, dishes, you'll probably have heard me talk before about making the bed, don't tend to be very high priorities for me. But at the moment, I'm finding that the visual simplicity that they create for me, having a made bed, having dishes done, actually feels very self-caring. And so that is one simple thing that I've done is said, okay, I'm creating a routine for myself that as the kids finish getting ready for school, I just do up the dishes. There's usually 4 or 5 things. It doesn't take very long, but then it's done. And I feel like it's a really simple action that really soothes my high sensitivity. Now, I laugh a little bit because I think probably most adults just do that. I think I'm a little bit under skilled maybe when it comes to just like normal adult activities around housework and stuff, and I'm very aware of that. So you might be listening to this thinking, well, everyone just does their dishes, like whatever. But for me, that has been a really important one. Likewise, I've put a beautiful plant in the middle of the table, and that just creates this lovely simplicity for me of being like, this is a beautiful thing for me to look at, and I love walking past it every day. The other places that this is showing up is even in things like social media use, technology, really reminding myself of like one thing at a time. And so it might be on your internet browser. If you tend to have a lot of tabs open, maybe leave them open on one window, but then move what you're working on to a window where it's all by itself or just with a couple of other tabs. Because it's important to recognize that as a highly sensitive person, you don't actually have a choice about how much information your brain is trying to process at any given time. So if you're in a noisy environment and there's a lot of things going on and, things are just hectic, it's not like you can be like, I will just zone that out. You don't really get to choose. I mean, to an extent you can. I don't want to make like bold kind of firm statements around that, but to an extent you can, but as a sort of more general rule, you are going to be just processing a lot of information. So if you can simplify that for yourself by not having so much visual kind of clutter on your desktop, for instance, just those tabs across the top, that might be a place where you can simplify and really feel the impact of that. That reminds me of a little story. I went shopping with my sister, and I might have told this story before, but it's still a good one to demonstrate what I'm talking about. And I sort of said, gosh, can you hear that bell? Like somebody is ringing a bell in the shop. There must have been like a little, pick up a little brass bell, and somebody was ringing it incessantly. And I could not deal with it. I was like, why is that person ringing the bell? They need to stop ringing the bell. That is so distracting. I felt very sort of sensorily overwhelmed. My sister was like, I'll just tune it out. I don't even notice. I'm like, wow, that's a superpower. How do you do that? And it's just our different ways of processing, right? And so in that environment, so in my work environment, I don't tend to have other noises. Like I don't put music on in the background. I don't listen to podcasts while I work because I find that really distracting. But it might just be that question, right? Of like, okay, well, how do I simplify things for my particular way of doing things? I know highly sensitive people who absolutely do put music on in the background because it feels really soothing. So it's not about, there's a particular way to do things, but rather what is going to help simplify things for you. Because like I said, I don't know if it's, a me quirk to kind of overcomplicate things unnecessarily, sometimes, not always, or if there is a bit of a high sensitivity bent to that. But the reality is, whether you tend to overcomplicate things or not, simplifying can be really nurturing to a highly sensitive nervous system, because it means that we're just modulating and managing how much stuff is coming in to deal with. So I want to just leave you with that question. Where can I simplify? It's kind of like this idea of just asking the question like, does it have to be like that? Right? So me with the podcast, with the intro and the outro, does it have to be like that? Actually doesn't. There's no rule that says it has to be like that. So can I simplify my workload? Can I simplify my process? Yeah, I actually get to do that. But had I not read that little clip, I probably wouldn't have even thought about it. I would have just kept going with the same pattern because it was what I knew. And so an invitation for you this week to ask yourself that question, is there a simpler way for me to do this that feels good? Because that's ultimately the goal, right? It's not to simplify necessarily just for simplicity's sake, but is there a way to simplify that helps to soothe and reassure my sensitive nervous system? All right, I'd love to hear what you come up with. If there's something that you already do, something that you're like, oh yeah, hang on, that makes me think of this, I would love to hear from you as always. So you can reach out to me over on Instagram I am at EricaWebb_SelfKind over there. You can also email me, erica@ericawebb.com.au. And yeah, I would love to hear from you. My special request for you this week is if you have a question that you would like me to answer on the podcast, I would love for you to ask it. We are approaching 300 episodes and I would love to do like a bit of a Q&A maybe for episode number 300. So I would love to hear from you if you have got any questions. All right, have a great one and I will talk to you soon.